Coming up on Primetime News, results are pouring in for the parliamentary by-elections here in Korea. 4 seats are up for grabs, with each district hotly contested. While holding a joint press conference with the U.S. President, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe offered no apology for the country's World War II sexual enslavement. And Korean business sentiment hits a new high, but the concern now is that it's mainly large companies leading the improvement. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, April 29th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choi. Thank you for joining us. By-elections were held from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time to fill 4 parliamentary seats and elect some local councillors as well.
And the parliamentary results could have a significant impact in the political arena. It could be seen as a reflection of public sentiment, especially with the snowballing bribery scandal dominating recent headlines.
And for more, let's connect to our Park Ji-won standing by at the National Assembly. Hello, Ji-won.
Hi, good evening. The votes are still being counted as polling stations closed just about 2 hours ago. Well, the final results could be available as early as 11 o'clock, but in some districts where neck-and-neck races were predicted, they may be as late as 2 or 3 in the morning.
And the races were expected to be tight, so voter turnout was critical. What are the final voter numbers?
Well, according to the National Election Commission, the final voter turnout stood at 36%. Well, that includes ballots cast during a 2-day early voting period last weekend, and it's slightly higher than the 33% turnout in last July's by-elections. Well, the rise may be attributed to interest in the recent bribery scandal.
Well, the atmosphere in each side is going to be as different as night and day soon when the results are out. But right now, how are both rival camps reacting so far?
Well, the rival parties are anxiously watching the results, each hoping to secure at least 2 of the 4 districts. However, because races are pretty close, well, it's hard to predict as of now the results. But whatever the outcome, it will have a huge impact on both parties. The ruling party has been mired in the scandal that started with businessman Song Man-jong's suicide memo earlier this month. The no listed names of 8 Conservative Party politicians who allegedly received kickbacks, including President Park's close aides at the presidential office and former Prime Minister Lee Wan-gu, who resigned due to the allegations. In this context, if the Saenuri Party secures more than 2 seats, it would be an unexpected boost for the administration's 3rd year and its reform agenda. But if the main opposition NPAD takes all 4 seats, the Park Geun-hye administration could be seen as ineffective for the remainder of its term, because the by-election results are also seen as a predictor of next year's general elections. For the main opposition party, these by-elections are seen as a key test of party leader Moon Jae-in's capacity as a potential presidential candidate in 2017. The Liberal Party has been calling for the public to cast their ballots in judgment of the incumbent administration and the corruption allegations against the ruling party. If the NPAD fails to gain at least 1 seat, it may even lead to party division. But for now, we just watch and wait. The final count will be available in a few hours, and I will bring you updates on Thursday morning's newscast. This has been Park Ji-won reporting live from the National Assembly.
Well, thank you for that, Ji-won. Let's move on to other stories now. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, currently on a week-long trip to the United States, held a joint press conference with U.S. President Barack Obama on Tuesday and agreed on cooperation in vast sectors like economy and security, but that is not our main focus.
Yes, and when asked about the issue of Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women from Korea, China, and other nations, many were left deeply dissatisfied with his answer. Hwang Sung-hee has more.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe again offered no apologies to the victims of Japan's wartime system of sexual slavery during a press conference in Washington on Tuesday. Rather, he merely repeated the remarks he made a day earlier.
On the issue of comfort women, I'm deeply pained to think about the comfort women who experienced immeasurable pain and suffering as a result of victimization due to human trafficking.
While the Japanese leader fell short of apologizing himself, he said he would uphold a landmark apology given to the victims more than 20 years ago.
This is a feeling that I share equally with my predecessors. The Abe cabinet upholds the Kono statement and has no intention to revise it.
In 1993, the Kono statement acknowledged for the first time that the victims were recruited against their own will by the Japanese military. Some 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve Japanese troops at military brothels during World War II. So far, Abe has denied Japan's involvement in what he calls human trafficking. But experts say Abe's attitude could be counterproductive, as his attempts to whitewash history only serve to increase international awareness of the issue.
It's only going to make people ask more questions about it, right? It's not going to silence people either inside Japan or anywhere in the world, because that's not how questioning and thinking research works. Everybody's going to want to know more.
Tuesday's joint press conference with President Obama was Abe's second public speech since arriving in the U.S. earlier this week. All eyes are on his final public speech in Washington on Wednesday, where he will be addressing a joint session of U.S. Congress, although most doubt he'll have a change of heart and issue a surprise apology there. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now to the latest on the aftermath of Saturday's earthquake in Nepal. A man was rescued after spending more than 80 hours inside an apartment building that collapsed during the massive quake. The 28-year-old was pulled out of the debris on Tuesday, along with 3 dead bodies. Authorities say the man appears to have survived on sheer willpower, as he had no access to food or water for more than 3 days. 2 landslides were also reported on the same day in a popular trekking area north of Kathmandu, with at least 200 people feared to be missing in each of the landslides. Those landslides have strained rescue operations in the aftermath of the 7.8 magnitude earthquake, which killed more than 5,000 people so far and injured more than 11,000. The death toll continues to rise as rescuers begin to reach remote villages and search for survivors who are still trapped under the debris. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of people are trying to flee the affected regions where food, water, and other supplies are running out. And the Korean government, in fact, will send a special plane to Nepal on Thursday to bring its citizens back home. Several Korean tourists are currently stranded in Nepal, including 44 high school students. Seoul's foreign ministry says that a Korean air flight will depart for Kathmandu at around 3 a.m. Korea time on Thursday and return at around 6:25 p.m. that night. The plane will carry emergency food, water, and other relief goods for the Korean embassy in Nepal to give to the remaining Korean nationals there. The ministry also plans to dispatch a second group of rescue team on Friday and send $500,000 worth of relief goods.
And some update on the young leader in North Korea, Kim Jong-un's questionable leadership. The young North Korean leader reportedly executed 15 senior officials during the first 4 months of the year. This, according to South Korean lawmakers briefed by the National Intelligence Service at a closed-door parliamentary session on Wednesday. The spy agency said a vice forestry minister was executed in January for complaining about the regime's forestation plan. The agency said the public executions of senior officials who challenge his power are part of Kim's reckless leadership style.
Korean manufacturer confidence for this month strengthened to its highest level since last April, but it was largely the big conglomerates that drove up the sentiment. The outlook for small and mid-sized firms remained unchanged. Shin Se-min has the details.
This month, confidence among Korean companies hit a record high since last April. The Bank of Korea says the business sentiment index for the month rose to 80, up 3 points from a month earlier. But a reading below 100 still means pessimists outnumber optimists. The bleak outlook also comes on the back of improved business sentiment for large firms, which saw their index go up by 5 points to 86 this month. The small and mid-sized companies remain the same.
Low global oil prices benefited the large firms, creating positive sentiment despite the slow economic growth. But it wasn't enough to make small and mid-sized firms feel that advantage.
The central bank also attributes the higher business sentiment among big firms to a record low key interest rate and the government measures to put in place to shore up the economy. Analysts say, however, that there is no guarantee that these favorable conditions will continue in the long run, setting off alarm bells even for conglomerates, which are less vulnerable to circumstances outside the country. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Two of Korea's tech leaders posted an earnings loss in the first quarter. That is Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics, but they're hoping the launch of their latest smartphones will lead to a recovery in the second quarter. Kim Min-ji has more.
Samsung Electronics saw its net profit fall nearly 40% in the first quarter from a year ago to about $4.3 billion. Still, the first quarter earnings represent the company's strongest performance in 9 months.
The first quarter earnings beat market expectations. The semiconductor and mobile sectors improved from the previous quarter, so we can say the earnings are good quality-wise.
Samsung still leads the global smartphone market, but its share has dropped over recent years due to competition from Chinese rivals and Apple's latest bigger iPhones. And while Samsung expects a significant boost from its latest flagship series, LG's new smartphone released Wednesday could pose a threat. The leather-clad G4 has a slight curve and comes with a powerful camera that's comparable to what you'd find on a digital SLR.
It's a very fast, very fluid device, probably one of the best I've played with this year.
LG expects the new model to be more popular than its predecessor, which sold over 10 million units. However, the market will likely get more competitive.
Currently, as Apple doesn't have a new model, it seems that sales of Samsung and LG phones will be good. However, competition is expected in the second half of the year due to new models from Apple and Chinese companies.
For now, LG hopes G4 sales will improve its second quarter earnings. Like Samsung, the company saw a significant drop in its first quarter net profit, down nearly 60%, despite strong sales of its G3 and low-end smartphones. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Moving on to other stories, landing a job in Korea is no easy task these days, and sadly, it's even more difficult if you're coming out of the military. Our Na Young-kyung went out to see how a few soon-to-be discharged non-commissioned officers and officers feel about the job market and their prospects for employment. Let's take a look.
I feel like I'm stuck with no way out. I think the biggest problem is that there are not enough jobs compared to the number of job seekers. Compared to regular job seekers, I feel like there's a limit to how much we can prepare. For example, unlike them, we can get tutoring on company entrance exams.
They're trained to fight, but this is a whole different type of battle. Some blame the policies, others blame the job market. But the reality is that the proportion of ex-military personnel who successfully transition into the civilian workforce in Korea is extremely low compared to other countries. To tackle this problem, the Korean Army is aiming to create 40,000 jobs for retiring soldiers by the year 2020.
There are also job fairs like this one to help members of the military move into civilian life. Here, they can talk directly to company representatives and get an advice on what they need to do to get the jobs they want.
But many say Korea still has a long way to go. For one, there's no mandatory employment quota for ex-military personnel, and there's no system for giving soldiers an extra advantage in the form of points on job applications. In other countries like the U.S. and Japan, servicemen are offered transition assistance programs to ease them into civilian life. They enter the program as much as a decade before they leave the service, but Korea's program is only 10 to 12 months long. Observers say there's a dire need for more jobs and higher quality positions for ex-servicemen, as well as a better employment support system. Na Hyun-kyo, Arirang News.
Korean education is notorious for its back-breaking study hours, with parents willing to pay a large sum for their private tutoring classes after school, for their children's classes, that is. In order to change that, the government came up with a plan to create a learning culture that can help students figure out what they want to do in life at an early stage. Our Kim Ji-yeon has this report.
It's midday on a school day, and around 1,000 teenage students are at the Seoul Arts Center to watch Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew as a ballet performance. The students are not ditching class or going on a school field trip. They're participating in a free semester program, a government initiative to give students vocational experiences through various extracurricular programs.
I wish my school could invite professional athletes as lecturers, since my dream is to become a basketball player.
After their morning classes, students are offered choices ranging from baking and carpentry to paying a visit to a local recording studio or newspaper publishing company. But the best part of the program may be that students don't have to take exams during the free semester. No midterms and finals, giving them more breathing space to nurture talents and interests that could launch lifetime careers. Educators seem to like the new program as well.
Teachers can come up with creative ideas to educate students. The problem is they lack the infrastructure to carry them out, particularly when it comes to exposing students to a wide range of career options. It would help if the government can provide connections to related companies and institutions to make this happen.
The free semester program is part of an attempt to change the country's highly competitive education culture and its focus on getting good grades. The Education Ministry is planning to propose a bill to expand the free semester program to all junior high schools by 2016. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Koreans love to see red numbers on the calendar, as it means a public holiday is ahead. There's a big holiday coming up later next month, and it's more than just a day off for Buddhists.
It is indeed. Preparations are already underway for Buddha's birthday. Our Connie Kim caught up with members of the Buddhist community getting ready for the big festivities.
When it's your 2,559th birthday, the celebrations begin early. Buddha's birthday takes place in a few weeks on May 25th, but the celebration committee kicked off festivities on Wednesday, lighting up this replica of a pagoda in central Seoul. The committee also invited international students to take part in the ceremonies.
I have an experience in temple stay, so I decided to participate in this Buddhist festival.
The Chogyesa Temple in Seoul is an important site in a country where 20% of the population is Buddhist. With the celebration just around the corner, members of the Buddhist community are busy cleaning the temples and putting up colorful lanterns. The lanterns are only up for a few weeks, but it takes the volunteers all year to make them, drawing the designs and painting them by hand.
This year, we try to include symbols of Buddhism, such as instruments and bells used in rituals.
Over 100,000 lotus lanterns will adorn the streets of Seoul, building up to the Lantern Festival starting May 16th, and various birthday events will take place across the country. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And for more top headlines from around the world, we connect to our Paul Yee at the News Center.
Our focus today: Australia condemns the mass execution of 8 prisoners in Indonesia. Tensions ease in Baltimore after Monday's riots, and Twitter takes a beating on Wall Street over lackluster earnings.
Well, Paul, let's begin in Indonesia. Despite a wave of international calls for clemency, authorities carried out executions on the leaders of the so-called Bali 9 drug gang. But it appears that one of the prisoners was spared at the very last minute.
That's right. Mary Jane Veloso from the Philippines was granted an 11th hour reprieve after a direct appeal from the country's president. The stay of execution came as a woman suspected of planting illegal drugs on Veloso nearly 5 years ago turned herself into police. Indonesia's Attorney General confirmed that the executions by firing squad of the 8 convicted drug smugglers were completed after midnight on Wednesday. The group included men from Australia, Brazil, Nigeria, and Indonesia. Both the Brazilian and Australian governments strongly condemned the act and said it would damage diplomatic relations.
These executions are both cruel and unnecessary. Cruel because both Andrew Chan and Myuran Sukumaran spent some decade in jail before being executed, and unnecessary because both of these young Australians were fully rehabilitated while in prison.
Sydney has recalled its ambassador as a sign of protest. The United Nations Human Rights Agency also denounced the executions, calling the refusal to grant clemency incomprehensible. Indonesia has defended the decision as part of its ongoing war against drug-related crimes. And moving on to the U.S. city of Baltimore, authorities lifted the citywide curfew early Wednesday as residents and volunteers began to pick up the pieces. Some 3,000 police officers backed by the National Guard have taken to the streets to prevent further violence and property damage. Amid criticism for acting too slow on Monday night, the police commissioner of Baltimore defended his city's response to the riots.
Yes, we prepared. We had over 200, 300 police officers out there around that mall at the time that it took place. Why didn't you move faster? Because there are 14, 15, and 16-year-old kids out there. Do you want people using force on 14, 15, 16-year-old kids that are out there? And they're old enough to know better. They're old enough to know not to do those things. They're old enough to be accountable, but they're still kids, unfortunately. And so we had to take that into account while we were out there.
Meanwhile, public outrage continues to spread across the country after a young black man died in police custody last month. Hundreds of protesters marched through Chicago in support of the late Freddie Gray. Internal investigations at the Baltimore Police Department are ongoing, and a federal investigation by the Justice Department and FBI is underway to determine if his death was the result of civil rights violations. And finally, shifting to some financial news, Twitter took a beating on Wall Street after figures from its upcoming earnings call were leaked. Shares plunged over 18% in Tuesday's trading after the early data sparked a sell-off among investors. Trading was briefly halted, but not before Twitter shares fell below $42 each. Shortly after Twitter officially posted its quarterly earnings, the company said it recorded a net loss of $162 million in the first quarter of this year, despite rising revenue. It blamed the sharp decline on an unsuccessful push into targeted ads. The microblogging service has now grown to 302 million active users worldwide, but analysts are casting doubts on whether Twitter can keep up the pace. And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Most parts of the nation experienced unpredictable weather today. There was light rain in upper parts, and some of the southern coastal area received up to 140 millimeters of monsoon-like rains, and rain clouds are still sticking around for some parts in the southern areas. And will continue to rain till tomorrow afternoon in the coastal areas, which will get up to 60 millimeters, while the metro regions will kick off Thursday under mostly sunny skies. And the sun will bring the high to 28 degrees Celsius in the capital tomorrow, which should be the hottest day of this season so far. In the meantime, Daegu and Gwangju will be peaking at 25, and Busan will hit 21 tomorrow afternoon. And as for the other regions, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island should see a high of 26 and 20, while Dokdo rises to 19. Now, the unseasonably warm weather will continue in the capital for the rest of of the week before another round of rain comes down on Sunday morning. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, they say 1,000 miles journey begins with a single step, and it helps if that first step you're wearing some comfortable shoes like we've seen in the picture just now.
Exactly, and we're having some results from the by-elections, and this ruling Saenuri party is quite winning the race.
Right, they're staying pretty dominant. It seems like they might have secured 3 seats at the moment, but we do not have the details at the moment. We will have further updates in our later newscast in the morning. Thank you for staying with us. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Hwang Jie. Please join us at the same time tomorrow for the updates and for more. Goodbye for now.